The hangar fell silent the moment she walked in. Admiral Cynthia Hargrove commanded every room she entered, not because she demanded it, but because 32 years of naval service had carved authority into the way she moved, the way she breathed, the way her eyes swept across a space like a radar system cataloging threats. She was the first female SEAL admiral in the history of the United States Navy, and she had earned every gold stripe on her sleeve with blood, salt water, and sacrifice. When she stepped onto that stage at Naval Station Norfolk for the annual Veterans Recognition Ceremony, the 200 uniformed officers behind her snapped to attention like a single organism. She was not a woman who made space for softness. So when the civilian stood at the back of the line, a broad-shouldered man in a worn brown jacket holding a guitar case, his teenage daughter clinging nervously to his side, Admiral Hargrove's eyes found him the way a hawk finds something out of place in an open field. He didn't belong in the crisp geometry of this ceremony. His jacket was faded, his boots were scuffed, his daughter's jeans had a fraying hem. They looked like people who had stumbled into the wrong building, and something in Hargrove's chest, hardened by years of command, curled into something close to contempt. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of those who carry invisible burdens, like comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, you belong here. His name on the program was Daniel Mercer, listed as a distinguished veteran nominee for the Community Service Award. The citation was brief, something about mentoring at-risk youth through music. But Admiral Hargrove barely glanced at it. She had given out hundreds of these awards. She had learned to read a man's posture before she read his file, and Daniel Mercer's posture told her a story she thought she already knew. Soft, she thought. Civilian soft. The kind of man who wore his sacrifice like a comfortable sweater rather than a second skin. When Daniel and his daughter Maya reached the front of the line and stepped up to the stage, Hargrove leaned into the microphone with a smile that carried the particular sharpness of someone who has confused authority with cruelty for so long that they can no longer tell the difference. She looked him up and down, noting the guitar case, the casual clothes, the young girl holding his hand, and said in a voice that carried across the entire hangar, warm enough to seem friendly, sharp enough to cut. "So, hero, you were Navy? What was your call sign?" The room held its breath. Daniel Mercer looked at her with eyes that were very still and very old, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, but from having survived things that peace cannot describe. He didn't flinch. He didn't smile nervously or stammer. He simply said, in a voice barely above a quiet exhale, "Iron Ghost." Something changed in the room. It moved like a current through still water, invisible but undeniable. Admiral Hargrove's smile didn't fade so much as it dissolved, like paper held over a flame. Her hand, which had been extended for a casual handshake, stopped mid-air. Her eyes changed. The cold calculation in them became something rawer and far more complicated, something that looked dangerously close to recognition and fear. Exchanged glances. Senior Chief Alvarez, who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, actually took a step backward without realizing it, because Iron Ghost was not an unknown name to people who had served in the shadows of America's longest wars. Iron Ghost was not a man you mocked. Iron Ghost was a ghost story told in quiet voices at naval bases around the world, a SEAL operator who had survived not 1, not 2, but 4 missions that were listed as unsurvivable in the classified after-action reports. A man who had carried 2 wounded teammates through 11 miles of hostile mountain terrain with a bullet lodged 2 centimeters from his spine. A man who had been left for dead by enemy forces not once but twice, and who had walked out of the dark both times. Iron Ghost was the kind of legend that career military people spoke about the way civilians spoke about folklore, half convinced it was real, half afraid of what it would mean if it was. And here he stood in a faded jacket holding his daughter's hand. Hargrove's throat moved as she swallowed. The silence in the hangar had grown enormous, pressing against the high metal ceiling, filling every corner. Maya, 16 years old, dark-haired and watchful, carrying her father's guitar case because his hands still shook in crowds sometimes, a fact she never mentioned to anyone, looked up at the Admiral with eyes that were gentle and completely unafraid. She had grown up knowing what her father carried. She had made his coffee at 3 in the morning when the nightmares came. She had learned to read the tension in his shoulders before it became something he couldn't manage alone. She had grown up in the enormous shadow of a man who never once spoke about what made him extraordinary. And she loved him not for the legend, but for the man who taught her 3 chords on a guitar and cried at the end of sad movies and made the best pancakes in the state of Virginia. Daniel had raised her alone since her mother passed when Maya was 4 years old. He had left the Navy not because the Navy asked him to, but because a little girl needed a father more than the country needed another ghost. He had traded classified missions for school pickups, combat psychology for pediatric therapy appointments, and the brotherhood of the SEAL teams for a small music program in a community center in Portsmouth, where he taught teenagers who had nowhere else to go how to find something worth holding on to inside a song. He had built a life out of pieces that most men would have called ruins, and he had built it quietly, without ceremony, without asking anyone to notice. Admiral Hargrove stepped down from the stage. Not a dramatic gesture, no fanfare, no speech. She simply walked down the 3 steps and stood on the same level as Daniel Mercer, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the particular humility of being entirely wrong about a person. She looked at him, really looked at him, and then she looked at Maya, who was watching her father with an expression so full of quiet pride that it was almost unbearable to witness. Hargrove extended her hand again, and this time it was not the gesture of a superior officer conferring an award. It was the gesture of one human being acknowledging another, with all the weight that acknowledgement deserved. Daniel took her hand. His grip was gentle. His eyes were kind. The room exhaled. If this story moves something in you, if Daniel's quiet strength, Maya's love, or the power of a second look made your heart feel something real, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. There is a kind of courage that wears a uniform and carries a weapon, and the world is right to honor it. But there is another kind, quieter, less visible, without medals or call signs, that gets up every morning and chooses to build something good from the wreckage of what the world took from it. Daniel Mercer had both kinds. The world had only seen the first. Comment the word ghost below if you believe the real heroes are the ones still fighting battles no one else can see. Maya played one song that afternoon, in the middle of that enormous hangar, with 200 naval officers standing still and listening. It was a simple melody, 3 chords, the ones her father taught her. And when she finished, there was not a single dry eye in the room, including, for the first time in a very long time, Admiral Cynthia Hargrove's. Some ghosts don't haunt. Some of them heal.